When Edward Haymond and his fellow riflemen first joined Daniel Morgan's Rifle Corps in June of 1777, their first task was harassing the British Army as it campaigned in New Jersey under General William Howe. They typically fired at the edges of the enemy army from a distance, while under cover, the real goal being to terrorize the British rank and file by creating an environment in which death might be expected at any time and around any corner. They didn't intend to confront the British directly, so any time enemy soldiers marched out to meet them in open battle, they generally just retreated to the relative safety of Continental lines. That changed after the Rifle Corps was reassigned to the northern theater of the war in August. Throughout the summer of 1777, British troops under General John Burgoyne had marched south from Canada in an attempt to seize control of the Hudson River Valley in New York, which would in effect sever the rebellious colonies in half. As the British marched toward their destination, the calls among rebel leaders in the north for a unit of riflemen to oppose the enemy mounted. Believing that the Rifle Corps might be particularly effective against the Indians fighting alongside Burgoyne's army because many of them were from the colonial borderlands, George Washington finally gave in. So, in August, he ordered Morgan and his men to join the troops under rebel generals Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold that were gathering in New York. Edward Haymond was with them and appears on payrolls for the unit throughout its time fighting Burgoyne's army from September to October. During that time period, Edward Haymond and the rest of Morgan's Rifle Corps played a pivotal role in rebel efforts to prevent Burgoyne's army from pushing past them and joining forces with British troops further south. The bulk of the rebel army under Gates and Arnold constructed a series of defensive positions on a hill called Bemis Heights that was west of the Hudson River, about 8 miles south of the town of Saratoga, New York, now known as Schuylerville. If Burgoyne tried to march his men down the road between Bemis Heights and the river in the east, they would be subjected to cannon fire along their flank the entire time. So, on September 19, 1777, in the First Battle of Saratoga, also named the Battle of Freeman's Farm after the farmland on which it was fought, Burgoyne and his soldiers tried to push past the rebels on the other side, their western flank. They were greeted by combined rifle and musket fire from Morgan's men and a unit of skirmishers under Major Henry Dearborn, future Secretary of War for Thomas Jefferson. Because it lay along both the Adirondack Mountains and the Hudson River, the battlefield around Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights was riddled with little ridges and ravines that were filled with rivulets of water. This made it an ideal defensive position, especially for light troops and marksmen like Morgan's and Dearborn's men, who stationed themselves in a forest on a slight ridge line overlooking Freeman's Farm to the northwest of the rebel defenses at Bemis Heights. They totaled 578 men, while the combined force of British soldiers, loyalists, and Indians marching toward them numbered over 2,000. The rest of the British army advanced southwards at the same time in 2 detachments further east, but were unable to accomplish much in the face of stiff resistance from the rebels in that area, and so retreated. The fighting to the west, however, where Haymond and the rest of Morgan's corps stood between the British and their best chance of making their way south, continued for several hours. Eventually, Morgan and Dearborn's men received reinforcements from the rebel soldiers commanded by General Benedict Arnold to the east of their position. This helped them keep the British from pushing past Freeman's Farm, but ultimately their losses were so great that the rebels were forced to retreat. They had lost nearly 300 men, but the British had lost twice that and failed to get past the defenses at Bemis Heights. It was enough for the rebels to claim victory, and much of the credit went to Morgan's riflemen in the battle's aftermath.